Hey, welcome back to another Ping Pong Flix Show. My name is Chris Wong. This is episode 341. We're going to go deep into another DCEU. This is more rumor mill, but a lot of sites are reporting it, so I'm going to feel like I have to talk about it. But first, let's go to the factual stuff, and this is coming from the Hollywood Reporter. The Hollywood Reporter reached out to Ann Sarnoff and asked her many questions in regards to her being hired by the Warner Media and being the new chair and CEO of Warner Brothers. This is what she had to say. "I've worked in many different companies with many different cultures," says Sarnoff. "I don't know the details and the inside story of the Warner Brothers culture, but I look forward to bringing my style and my perspective into the culture at Warner Brothers, a style that's collaborative, respectful of talent, of knowing of who's smart and who to listen to." She also added a little bit more about the shape shifting that's going to happen. "We talked about all the shape shifting happening, the disruption of how people are consuming media and the new routes to market. How do you take an amazing set of assets and continue to evolve and address the dynamics in the business?" And she's kind of talking about her experience in the streaming service she called BritBox. And so we know from what I talked about yesterday, they're really looking into the Warner Media streaming service. So that's just part of the conversation. Actually, probably the biggest part of the conversation and why she's why she was hired to this position, and mainly. They talked a little bit about having worked in the Nickelodeon in the 90s. She said, I was at Nickelodeon when the millennials were born, and I know a lot about them because they were our audience. I've watched them grow up, and I know a little bit about how they consume media. So this is in addition to what I said yesterday. In fact, it's almost pretty much she's taking what she talked about from the Georgetown panel video that I shared with you guys, or I hope you looked at the link, click on the link, and actually went to watch it. But it's all about that. Her two kids, trying to connect with them and trying to connect with the millennials. This is all about that. And it's just a smart business decision, because that's where businesses are heading, where every business is just trying to find a way to connect to that younger consumer, right? That are growing up and wanting to access things much more quickly, much more easily, at a faster pace. But they still had a lot more to talk about. They talked about a little bit about about Toby Emmerich. So she had this to say: "Toby's done a great job running the movie side of things. I'm looking forward to learning more about it and adding my experiences. At the end of the day, it's all the same consumer, whether they're watching television or going to the movies." She decided to decline any questions about the $500 million courtship of J.J. Abrams, or on what direction she sees for the DC Extended Universe. She said this: "It's early days, so no, but I'm making notes of the questions I need to answer, so thank you." She says the question of how to integrate the studio with Warner Brothers' new corporate parent AT&T wasn't a focal point of her conversations with Stanky. So that's also very interesting that there's probably being very political here. She is a businesswoman, after all, and an executive position, choosing her words carefully. But you can see there's probably a lot more going on there in the way she decides not to answer some questions in regards to J.J. Abrams, in regards to the DC Extended Universe. And she's being very modest and very politely about Toby Emmerich. And that's just a political thing to do, right? So we'll tell what her actions, if there are any that come of her being hired to this position, and what comes out from that is going to be the points that will stick to see what direction she's going to, what is her goal here, in terms of how she wants to shapeshift and shape this AT&T Warner Media Group, and Warner Brothers, actually more Warner Brothers than anything. So we'll see what happens with that, but it's very exciting stuff as she gets to work this summer. And being that this is a big position for a person like herself, the first woman in over 100 years in terms of Warner Brothers, it's going to be big, and she's going to really, if she is any bit the type of person she was talking about, or people talk about her about being that woman in a leadership position, she is definitely going to throw her weight around. Even for people who are in the company who may think that this is nothing but just maybe possibly like a face of the company trying to look good, that could be it too. But she's a person. She's not some a clerk that they just brought up to be. They brought her, and she has the experience, she has the portfolio, and she seems like, according to all the stuff she's been working on, everything she's done, like a strong leadership position. She is there to make changes, and if anyone kind of under her undermines her, she seems the type to not take that lightly, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens from here on out. I can totally see a lot of people in the company being a little bit nervous, but John Stankey hired for a reason, so we'll see what happens with that. She is the bridge between AT&T and Warner Brothers. She is that bridge to connect that together so that it's integrated better. And her experience in the BBC and things like this, this is probably what they're trying to do. But we'll see if that even helps us in any way, in terms of Justice League or Zack Snyder and things like that. We won't know until we start seeing some progress and actions, maybe even a year from now. We're not even sure, right? So, but it's looking good that we need that little change. So I'm very interested, very optimistic about it, and so I'm waiting to see what's going to happen from here on out. Now let's get into the rumors, and there's quite a bit, but it's interesting rumors, and it's not tinfoily, I would say, because it's not something too out there ridiculous to even think about. It seems like something that could be out in the mass media right now. This is coming from Batman on Film. They're reporting that Andy Serkis is in the mix to join the cast of Matt Reeves' The Batman. Now, of course, Andy Serkis and Matt Reeves, they've worked together on the Planet of the Apes films, although we probably won't be seeing him doing motion capture for a movie like The Batman, which I'm thinking is going to be like a lower budgeted Batman film, as it's a murder mystery. There's probably not going to be a lot of action in it. There's going to be a lot more intrigue and detective type work. It's a film noir, type of work. So there will be nothing really to motion capture. But I could totally see Andy Serkis playing. This is just me. Playing Penguin, right? Now that we know Josh Gad, who came out on Twitter and says, "Hey guys, I'm just messing around," and I'm just paraphrasing this. I'm messing around. I'm not playing the Penguin. That was just something that he wanted, and maybe at one time he was about to play the Penguin, but who knows? But makes very much sense. Andy Serkis would play the Penguin and would work with Matt Reeves. A lot of these directors like to bring with them actors and actresses they've worked with before, because they're comfortable with them and they can work with them, and they will utilize their talents for future projects. And I could totally see Andy Serkis being one of those people that he'd bring with him, whether it be a minor role or a major role. We're not sure, but I myself, in my opinion, he'd be a pretty terrific Penguin. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. So that's coming from Batman on Film in regards to the Batman. Another interesting thing is that on Bloody Disgusting, there's a chance we'll get a Swamp Thing movie. Yeah, so this is also a little bit more on the rumor side because it is, after all, ultimately coming from We Got This Discovered. But they're reporting that Warner Brothers may develop a Swamp Thing film. The initial goodwill around the DC Universe series and the backlash against the cancellation seems to have inspired the studio to consider doing something with the character on the big screen. However, they said this wouldn't be a continuation of the show. This would feature a whole new cast, but the producer James Wan would be involved. Though Bloody Disgusting can confirm the validity of the report and the indication that it will be a horror movie, although it should be stressed that this report is astoundingly premature as of this writing. It's just really internal chatter, so we can kind of gauge that maybe We Got This Discover's reports, his sources are really just chatter. But if anything, it's chatter within that company, so it could lead to something. Something. There are creative. With that being said, there were creative differences behind the development of the DC Universe Swamp Thing series, and that ultimately got canceled, which came out with everybody saying "Save Swamp Thing." I haven't watched it yet. I haven't had time, but I will look into it. I heard it's really good. I heard that it's got great horror elements and character, and I believe a lot of people, Snyder fans, also love it as well. So it might be something down my alley. I don't know, but just looking at this is really interesting. I don't cover TV series at all, actually. I did one or two times, but Swamp Thing, a film could be interesting, and I could definitely, it kind of leading to another, Justice League Dark that was supposed to have been created before, but that never led anywhere. We also had a Constantine movie, but a Swamp Thing film is interesting. But what is weird about this is the fact that they're saying that Warner Brothers DC wants to they're doing this as a good faith to the Save the Swamp Thing fans by making a film, but with none of the cast and crew, none of the cast and possibly the characters from the Swamp Thing series. I find that odd. I don't think that's actually a good faith type thing. I think that's just you're rebooting it and you're like throwing that idea away. That is weird. So I don't know what's the deal with that, but ultimately I think DC Universe is going downhill. I think it's being prepped to be absorbed by the Warner Media streaming service, and it's just that's the way it's going. But it seems like it was a good series. People seem to love it. The critics loved it. But I don't know what happened with that. And it may come back when the Warner Media streaming services gets launched and they get DC Universe content on there. It may just come back. But at this point, when they're saying that they're going to make a Swamp Thing film in good faith for the Save the Swamp Thing fans, I don't believe that. That's just a weird thing to do, and that is not a good faith at all. That's almost a slap in the face to the Swamp Thing fans. So, but we'll see what happens to that. Like I said, it's just internal chatter, and there's probably going to be a lot more coming out of that. But we're not done yet, though. We Got the Discovered is on a roll today, and it's not only it also kicks into high gear when in terms of actually casting a pretty big character, I would say. It's not Superman or Batman, but it's actually Batgirl. What they're saying is that their sources are saying there's two particularly different people who are being looked at to play the Batgirl, Barbara Gordon herself. The first one is Catherine Langford. So she was supposed to have been cast as Tony Stark's daughter in the original Endgame before it was recasted to a younger girl. The other person is Daisy Ridley. Rey herself from Star Wars. It may actually be Barbara Gordon, Batgirl. Now, knowing what we know from We Got This Discovered, none of this may actually be true, and it could just be internal chatter, a wish list, if you will. Remember, they were talking about how they were kind of looking at Batgirl. They wanted a type of character. Kristen Stewart came to mind, a type of character, like a Kristen Stewart type Batgirl. And so that people got like, well, oh, is Kristen Stewart going to be Batgirl? Which also went to another weird discussion when we finally found out that Robert Pattinson is Batman, and having her be Batgirl is just going to make things really awkward, unless you've seen the Killing Joke animated movie by Bruce Timm. Then you're just like, yeah, well, that makes sense. But not going there. Batgirl at least is being into the part of the conversation again, and it's probably because of Birds of Prey is pretty much almost after, it's in post-production already. Christina Hodson, who's a screenwriter for Birds of Prey, is the person writing Batgirl, so that might be part of it. It might be part of doing in Margot Robbie's company. Maybe she's probably putting that in full gear somewhere else as they're working on that. Got the go ahead by Warner Brothers to do that. Who knows? But she does love writing it. Christina Hodson, it says it's a total joy to work on. She loves the character, and every day she's finding new things to love and get excited about. But so choice between these two, Catherine Langford and Daisy Ridley. Obviously, Daisy Ridley, people are going to know her a lot more than Catherine Langford. So makes me believe that it's possibly more Catherine Langford than someone who has a star, a powerhouse like Daisy Ridley, who is going to be coming out of the big blockbuster films, and her agents may actually want her to be, have a lot more money than a smaller budget films in which DC is going into. And we'll see what happens with that. But I'm leaning more towards someone we barely know, or not out in the open, like a TV star or something like that. So and that's who I'm really leaning towards if Batgirl ever gets made. But that leads into the conversation that I want to have. And some people have already talked about this in the direction of the DCEU, and we don't know until what happens when Anna Sarnoff actually takes charge and what direction she really wants to put it in, what she does, if anything, with Toby Emmerich or whatnot. But the direction right now, in terms of Toby Emmerich, Walter Hamada, is an interesting thing. And I've talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to go in full mode here as we finish up this podcast. That what they're doing now in terms of New Line Cinema is taking that horror-based movie making, that sensibility, and putting that as the plan for how they create their DCEU as so far, notwithstanding Aquaman and Wonder Woman 1984, although I haven't seen the production budget for Wonder Woman 1984. But those two were created in the original regime with Jeff Johns and John Berg. This new regime is essentially from New Line Cinema. And what they're good for is making the most amount of money with less budgets. And you see how all these horror movies they spit out, right? Including the new Annabelle movie that's coming out. Very low budget, high profitability, and they can get away with that because of the sense of the thrill, the scare moments. It's harder to do, but it's so cliche enough that people would just flood the theaters to go watch it, and it's easy to do by doing some camera work and snapping him back and forth and doing surprise and jump scares and stuff like that. The creepy factor of it doesn't take that much special effects and stuff. But having them, what it feels like they're taking that mentality and plopping in DCEU in order to make movies like Joker, Birds of Prey, and possibly even Batgirl and Suicide Squad. What they feel like is like very small budget movies where they're no longer making blockbuster films, or at least they want to make a blockbuster film but with a lower budget. But ultimately you see something like Shazam, it's a lower budget and it made a lot of money because in the books it looks great, because 90 million to 400, great. But in terms of blockbuster type appeal, in terms of how much that box office earned, a superhero or superhero movie essentially usually makes like 500-600 million at this time of age, and having that is comparing Shazam to those type of movies. It looks like it's underperforming visually when you see the end result, but it's hugely high profit, right? 90 to 400, that's a lot of money. And in terms of a business plan, it's very smart. But that really actually will kind of degrade and devalue some of the superhero stories that DC can actually tell. We won't, I'm not sure yet, because right now they're only planning these 4 movies. They're going to do The Trench, which is going to be like a horror, smaller film. I mean, the only big budget I could think of is Aquaman 2 out of this new regime. But even then, they may even make that a smaller movie. Who knows? So I'm optimistic, but and happy that they're found ways to make movies with the budget that they got, and that's why you see something like Birds of Prey. It looks very almost like an independent film, hiring an independent director. Todd Phillips' Joker, it's very small, looks very independent. It's almost Oscar worthy, if you will, and so. But how would that apply to bigger movies that we want to see? Like another Superman film, another space adventure, Green Lantern Corps. That they really gotta dive deep for bigger budgets. But right now, it just doesn't seem like they're going that route right now. They're playing it super, super safe. They're playing it how they're played the horror, Conjuring universe, shared universe movies they have. And ultimately, I hope it doesn't degrade to the point where they're just spitting out things to make high profitability, but it's low quality content, like The Nun, right? And you've seen that happen already. And this Annabelle coming out, I heard it's not that good. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but it's no Conjuring, right? So that's the kind of thing I'm curious about. I'm really sometimes concerned about in ways that they're just really not going to go all out. They're too scared, too afraid, and that's why they're holding back on doing all these bigger projects like Justice League or a Flash or a Cyborg, something that will probably use a lot of special effects, which requires a lot of money. Instead they're just going to go through movies that would not need have characters that would not need special effects or too much of it. And a lot of that lot of those characters come from the Batman universe. That's why the Batman is going to be a noir type film, a mystery, probably not a lot of action. It's easy to just make some costumes and stuff like that. A lot of drama more than anything. No, not too much explosions. The Suicide Squad movie that's coming out, it sounds like more of like in the wastelands, where they're going to Egypt and stuff like that. So it's a very smaller film. They're in the desert. It's going to be shot like it's like a military type a team dropped in on a suicide mission. So there's not much big things, and that's fine because those are the types of stories that don't need a lot of bigger budget. So what I'm saying is that, what about the ones that would need those bigger budgets? Are they too afraid? Are they too scared? Are they too non-committal to going that route and having to pay a lot of money and not expect too much returns? Is that their game right now? And if that's the case, we're not going to see bigger budget films for a long time. Unless if Aquaman 2 comes out and it pays off and it's a big budget film, it's just as big and epic and CGI filled as the first Aquaman, then okay, great, I need some of that. A lot of the DC heroes need some of that. It's not all just smaller films. There's some big epic moments in there, and those are giant blockbuster films. And then I'll be happy with that. If Wonder Woman 1984 came out, even though it's made from the old regime, and they see that how successful it is, and if it comes out blazing and makes $1 billion like the first Aquaman, it may not even have to be, maybe under 800, 900. Then hopefully that opens their eyes and takes that money and plop it into more giant epics instead of just only making smaller, kind of independent, very smaller films that don't need a lot of special effects, don't need a lot of action, don't need a lot of budget, and just playing it safe. I want them to have those movies. But in addition to those smaller movies, just take the risk and make those big movies too, because those I love spectacles, and DC movies, DC comics, they have a lot of spectacles as well. It's not all smaller base comics, it's not all drama and stuff. There's drama in it, but you want those spectacles as well. So I'm hoping that they do that. I'm hoping they're not just playing it safe and they're going to even go there. That's why we're not hearing anything about Superman or things like that. Supergirl, maybe a smaller film, who knows? But I hope they take the risks and actually start making more bigger blockbusters after 1984 and Aquaman 2 and whatever, so on and so forth. I think that better to put more value into the DC world, DCEU. All right, well, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening if you're on podcast. And thank you so much for subscribing. I'll see you next time.